One guy who's putting his name out there is Davante Adams, wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Great transition.
Oh, that was rough. He's been kind of outspoken about what he's looking for from his quarterback there in Las Vegas, which is one of the, I don't know how to say, handful of quarterback competitions that's going on between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, who was brought in this offseason. We've got some sound from Davante Adams talking about what he's looking for out of his quarterback. Take a listen here.
The best, when it's time, when it's live bullets. So at the end of the day, I don't have a preference other than the fact that I want somebody that's confident and ready to go when it's time to do it. So whoever that is, that's who I want throwing the ball. I think right now, if I had to say, I think Aiden has the job because, obviously he was here before and that's the way that it was. He was running with the ones more, and until Gardner comes in and, takes the job away from him, I think it's Aiden's job right now.
That's Davante Adams speaking on FS1. Shout out to them. When you hear those words, obviously, LaVar, you're close with some of the staff there in Las Vegas. I keep going back to the draft, keep going back to free agency. This couldn't have been the situation the Raiders wanted to be in heading into the season, with it being a quarterback battle between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. Or am I wrong in that assessment?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think they were banking on being able to draft a guy and start the development process and moving forward with a new era of Raiders football. That didn't happen because of the way the draft, played out with the drafting of the quarterbacks. And so they're left to try to figure out, is it Aiden O'Connell or is it Gardner Minshew? And listening to, Davante and how he sounded speaking on it, it's interesting because let me ask you this. In sports, and maybe in football in particular, do you think that every single swinging season, every single week, every single practice, do you think that it is reasonable to think that you have to fight for your starting job? Is that reasonable?
Okay. There's two ways of answering this. I don't know that it's reasonable because you're going to have people who solidify themselves in a spot, in a position, but the people who do should be looking at their competition as not ever like on your roster necessarily, but also who you're playing against. So if you're Justin Jefferson, clearly he's established as the number one receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, but he's looking at himself amongst the rest of the league and saying, I want to showcase I'm better than Jamar Chase, better than Tyreek Hill, better than Davante Adams, better than all these other guys out there, whoever else you want to throw in the conversation at wide receiver. So in saying that, I don't think that's realistic to constantly have competition because you're going to announce at some point there's a starter, and then that starter needs to have a bit of leeway or a leash, if you will, to make mistakes and still be able to go out there and play, carefree or loose, if you will.
Okay. Then that would assume. Then if that's the reasoning, wouldn't we assume that Aiden O'Connell, like Davante said, is the starting quarterback? Or is he competing against Gardner Minshew?
Well, this is a different circumstance, right? Like Gardner Minshew's getting paid more. So from an economical perspective, you could say like if Gardner's there, he's going to be playing. Although I'm not sure this was by design, right? I think they would have liked to have drafted a guy in the first round. I think they would have liked to somehow found a way of bringing someone else in that they maybe feel better about. Now, that's just my speculation from the outside. But this couldn't have been plan A, that you've got a quarterback battle between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew going into the season. I would imagine this is probably plan B or C as to what did not happen over the course of the offseason with their roster to put them in a position, at least at the quarterback spot.
I don't know that Davante Adams feels confident about the situation he's in. It doesn't sound like in his voice that there's a confidence about talking about the situation. That's what I would take from his comments. And I don't want to speak for him. I don't know him. I'm just going off of just kind of the context and just his tone, there's uncertainty. There's obviously uncertainty in that, and he's looking at it like, look, Aiden O'Connell is the one that has taken more than 1 reps, but Gardner Minshew needs to show that he can play before he gets the nod to be the starter. He has to win the job. If that's your star receiver and he's talking about that, I don't feel like that's the greatest of conversations to be kind of coming out from your top guy, from your players. You know, we're in July. The football season starts like less than 50 days, right?
I would say actually like 2 weeks for training camp, but basically, you know.
I just think that you're too close to the season for your top guy to be talking this way. I mean, am I wrong for maybe assuming that way? I just feel like you should be talking about being better in terms of things we want to get accomplished. We want to beat Kansas City this year, or this, that, and the other. Like, to me, to have the conversation of not knowing who's going to be throwing you the ball that says to me that's a team that I would be looking at and saying, can they win? I mean, and listen, I mean, that's my dog. That's the head coach. I don't think that he put himself in this situation. I think it's the situation that this organization has found themselves in, that they do not have a quarterback that is defined as the guy for this team. How do you have that and still be able to have a fair opportunity to compete and be successful going into the season? Unless something were to happen, you know, you get a Brock Purdy that pops up. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. I mean, maybe they're hoping that they get a performance from one of these guys where it offsets what seemingly was a miss on getting a quarterback for this year.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, in saying that, you know, do you feel like Mark Davis is willing to allow Antonio Pierce to go through a year of trying to clean up the cap, trying to get this roster in a better spot, to build and eventually have it ready for that quarterback if Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew don't emerge as that guy a year from now? Now, that's the tough part.
Wouldn't you think that if this was an organizational happening, right? I don't think this is not a coach's deal. This is the organization didn't get a I would say a bona fide changer in free agency, and they didn't come up on one in the draft. They didn't draft up. They weren't aggressive in trying to move up to get a quarterback. They stayed where they were at, I believe. They didn't draft. They didn't trade up, did they?
No, but they
sat out their pick. Right. I mean, they got a great tight end. That's a great addition. But who's going to throw him the ball?
Yeah.
So my whole thing is
issue.
Right. So my whole thing is if you know that your organization, your team does not have a bona fide franchise quarterback, why would you judge the coach off of if it's tight games, if this team is coming up short? I would hope that the owner of the team sees the value in what a coach is doing with less, rather than say, well, we're going to get rid of them and bring somebody else in. And then first thing that new coach is going to want to do is the same thing this coach is wanting to do, which is bring in a quarterback that can be a franchise guy for your team. They don't have a franchise guy right now.
Exactly. No, I'm right there with you. And I think that's kind of the predicament or conundrum that Mark Davis would be in.